All right, let's go ahead and get started. We got quite a bit to go through today. We got to finish up our two perspectives that we looked at yesterday, and then we got to add a psychology today perspective. There's like three more on top of that that we're gonna look at today. Okay, so a lot of content today in class. Number one: Ernst Weber, Edward Titchener, Gustav Fechner, Hermann von Helmholtz. Which one doesn't belong? What do we got, Lindy? Edward Titchener doesn't belong. Why doesn't Titchener belong?
Because the other three were founders of psychology, and he was U.S. or they were from Germany.
There you go. Very good. So they had some. I put them up there to give you an idea that they had some German origins, or psychology has some German origins. Titchener was a student of who? Who's the father of psychology? Wundt. So he's one of Wundt's students, even though he wasn't German, right? And he brought the ideas of Wundt's structuralism over to the United States to what university? Cornell University. Think Andy Bernard, right? Cornell University over like Ithaca, New York, or something like that for Cornell. So it gives us a little bit of history there. Objective, measurable, congruent, observable. Which one doesn't belong? Ruben? Congruent. Why doesn't congruent belong?
Because it would mean, observable, measurable, and objective all go together.
And why do they all go together?
Because they mean to measure, or congruent means...
Well, good try. Griff?
Don't they all have to do with behavior?
Yeah, very good. Watson says, hey, let's not look at the mind, and try to measure that. It's, too vague. We're struggling to do that. So let's look at the outward behavior. Behaviorism is objective, it's measurable, it is observable. Right? He said those three things. He did not say congruent. Number three, rationalization, projection, denial, and cognitive dissonance. Which one doesn't belong? Miss Alex. And why doesn't it belong? Egos, close. Miss Lindy? Defense mechanisms that go along with ego, right? So I didn't share this with you yesterday in class, but the purpose of a defense mechanism is to save self-esteem, all right? Maintain one's self-esteem. Remember we said that sometimes the id and the superego make it difficult for the ego to make a good decision. So sometimes you have to come up with some type of justification for the decision that you make. Here comes the defense mechanisms. Sound good? To save self-esteem. There's Flanagan.
Is that why some people laugh after they talk all the time?
Yeah, sometimes they do. Yeah, that could be reaction formation is one particular defense mechanism we didn't mention yesterday. We kind of mask your emotions with something, an opposite emotion. In that particular case, humor, I guess, happiness. Number four, Freud, Skinner, Watson, Thorndike. Which one doesn't belong? Miss Stoner.
Probably Thorndike.
Thorndike's a good guess.
Why?
No, it's not Thorndike.
It's not?
No.
Okay.
You want to take another guess?
No.
Maybe phrase it a different way. Please take another guess. You're up to a 33% chance of getting it right.
Skinner.
Skinner is a good guess. It is not Skinner. You're up to 50% chance of getting it right.
I don't know. Watson.
Watson's a good guess. You are up to a 100% chance of getting it right. It is Freud. Ruben, why is it Freud?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Oh.
The answer.
You just like taking guesses. Mm-hmm. You might know why it's Freud. What connects Watson, Skinner, and Thorndike? Thorndike we didn't throw in there. I mentioned them really fast yesterday. But the other two we talked about for sure. Miss Flanagan, it'd be pretty impressive if you knew the answer.
I'm just going to say, does it have something to do with an experiment of some kind?
Good try. Watson and Skinner are associated with which psych perspective? Yes, Miss Wiggin. Behaviorism. Thorndike's thrown in the mix there as well. We mentioned Thorndike's law of effect. That really kind of initiated the process with Skinner with his operant conditioning. Law of effect says the outcome of one's behavior determines whether you're going to repeat that behavior or not. Good consequences, you're going to repeat that behavior. Bad consequences, you're not going to repeat that behavior. I'll use the example. We'll get to this again a little bit later, but I say, if there's a guy at a social environment, social setting, he's dropping pickup lines, right? And he's got one pickup line that he shares with this one potential significant other, and she throws her drink into his face, right? Is he likely to reuse that pickup line again? Try it again? No. But what if he, throws out that pickup line and all of a sudden he gets, I used to say phone numbers, but I can't say that anymore. What is it, your Snapchat ID or something like that? I got her Snapchat ID, right? So you get that, and is he likely to use that pickup line again?
No. Wait.
Yes! Because good consequences increase behavior. That's the law of effect. Sound good? The law of effect there. Any questions about her bell work? Nope. All right, let's get back at it. Get your notes back out from yesterday. Good lines, Smith.
Alright, I'll see you later.
Yep, see you, Miss Donor. Okay. So we got all the way to talk about psychoanalysis, right? The defense mechanisms. We finished up with that. We're going to go back to defense mechanisms and psychoanalysis and Freud. We kind of, what do you call those things, bookshelves? Put them on the ends. It's a metaphor. Man, it's getting old. Rationalization, right? Bookends. It's bookends. We'll start with psychoanalysis. We'll end with psychoanalysis in Freud at the very end of the semester. So the other aspect of Freud's theory of psychoanalysis that we'll end the semester on is the psychosexual stages of development. He says that we go through these stages in childhood, and it's based off of our progression, our healthy progression through these stages that end up impacting our personality development there. So we talked a lot about fixations and getting stuck on things. So some interesting content there that you look forward to at the end of the semester. All right. So we had behaviorism yesterday and then psychoanalysis, and now we have humanistic psychology. So to differentiate these three, there's one approach that I want you to think about. First off, humanistic psychology was created, we're talking about the middle of the 20th century, about the 1950s, 1960s. It really fits in well with the 1960s, this counterculture ideology that's going on in the 1960s. Humanistic psychology kind of fits in well with that. But the idea is that it was in contrast to the previous two perspectives, right, of behaviorism and psychoanalysis. Because of those two and the things that the psychologists, these new researchers, didn't like about it, here comes humanistic psychology, okay? The way that we approach it is as how do these psychologists perceive a child at birth? A psychoanalyst, all right, somebody like a Freud, right? When he looks at a child, does he see that child as being innately good, innately bad, or just susceptible to being influenced later on in life? Freud, innately good, innately bad, or it? Take a guess. You got three options, 33% chance. Yes.
33. Bad.
Bad, you are correct. Very good. Freud says that a child is innately bad. He says that they're the only part of the personality of the id, ego, and superego that you're born with is the id. Remember we talked about the id being selfish, right? Selfish, evil, those type of things. So naturally bad at birth, okay? So then you get humanistic psychology. How do you think they approach it? Are they innately bad, innately good, or just it? You're down to a 50% chance, or up to a 50% chance of getting it right now. Ruben, you like to guess? It. Good try.
Oh, good.
Yes. All right. So humanistic psychology is very positive. Okay. Yeah, it's more like your warm, fuzzy feeling type of psychology. It goes against some of the thoughts of we're innately bad people of psychoanalysis, and then the idea of free will, it kind of goes against that no free will idea of B.F. Skinner stuff from behaviorism, okay? So a behaviorist, then when it looks at, like John B. Watson S stuff, looks at a child at birth, are they innately good, innately bad, or just it? They are it. They are susceptible to environmental influences, right? The nurture aspects of things, okay? So if you think about the way that they look at a child at birth, then it helps you to differentiate humanistic psychology by behaviorism and psychoanalysis, okay? So again, creative response to behaviorism and psychoanalysis, and it focuses on the uniqueness of human beings and their ability to make decisions, okay? So all about free will. There's two psychologists, just like two psychologists with behaviorism, that I want you to be familiar with. Again, with behaviorism, you had John B. Watson created it. He's the little Albert guy. Give me any child that you want, and I can make him into anything that you want, right? And then you have Skinner comes along. He popularizes behaviorism. That's the operant conditioning, gold star syndrome kind of guy, right? With humanistic psychology, we have Abraham Maslow and we have Carl Rogers. Okay, and they're known for two different things. First, with Maslow, he's known for this pyramid-like structure. It's called the hierarchy of needs. Hierarchy of needs. And so what he's really focusing on is motives, motivation. Okay? He's saying that it's innate and it's inside of us that we are all, good people. That's his perspective. And that we have this natural drive to be the best person possible. Right? And the best person possible, the way that he terms it, is to get to the top of this pyramid. And this is really not the terminology I want you to make. I want you to think about this one as being the top. Somebody added the self-transcendent stuff. Self-actualization. Write down self-actualization as the top. Sound good? So he says, everybody that's born, Maslow says, we have this need, we have this desire to be the best person we can get, the best person we can be, and achieve self-actualization. Problem is, there's a number of things that we have to go through in order to get there. Okay? So down at the bottom of the pyramid, we have to satisfy these needs first, the physiological needs. All right? So those things would be like comfort. Those things would be like food, water, those things. Okay? Once you satisfy those, then you can get to security needs. Right? Making sure that you're in a safe environment. Then once you get those needs satisfied, then you go to social needs, relationships, and then you can go more personal self-esteem needs, having a high self-esteem, self-confidence, and once you achieve all that, then you can get up to self-actualization. Now, according to his theory, he says that very few, we all strive for that, but very few actually get there. He threw out some names, guys like Abraham Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi, Eleanor Roosevelt. Those individuals, okay, reach self-actualization. But all of us strive for it. Not many of us get there, okay? Let's skip to the other guy. Whoops, going the wrong way. Man. Let's think about Carl Rogers for a second. I guess I don't have a slide for him. With Carl Rogers, he popularized and promoted this idea of group therapy. So write group therapy out to the side. Group therapy. This is where individuals that struggle with something, they get together. A lot of times it's addictions. They get together and they converse with one another, hold each other accountable. They talk about their struggles. And through that process of accountability, they're able to together overcome some of their personal issues that they have. So anybody know what one popular addiction group would be? Familiar with it? Anybody ever heard of? Yes, Mr. Alcoholics Anonymous. You may write AA out the side. That kind of reflects this humanistic psychology approach. Sound good? So it's been used quite successfully. It's been used in other types of environments as well. I know that different educational systems, some school systems will use group therapy to try to help students that are going through some of their struggles that they have as high school students. Okay. Again, it promotes free will, positive view of human nature. You've got the hierarchy of needs and group therapy, like we talked about, mentioned hierarchy of needs, Maslow, and the group therapy, Carl Rogers stuff there. Okay. Again, think about the free will. That's the complete opposite of Skinner and no free will, the ultimate behaviorist there. Okay. All right, moving on to the last one from yesterday. It's cognitive psychology. All right. With cognitive psychology, it's a combination of two of the previous approaches. It's really a combination of humanistic psychology, so it's a little bit more of a positive approach to studying human behavior. But in addition to that, it does take into consideration some of the aspects of behaviorism in there as well. So with the behaviorism, it's thinking about like one's environment and routines that we get into that influence our mental processes a little bit there. Okay, so cognitive psychology, again, it does focus a lot on mental processes. Sometimes students get confused about what are mental processes. If you just write down like sensations and perceptions, that's a good start to thinking about mental processes. Senses, sensations, and perception. So we think about the five senses, right? Sight, taste, touch, hearing. That could fall underneath cognitive psychology. And then perception, how do we perceive things in the world around us? That could fall underneath cognitive psychology. There are two subcategories of cognitive psychology I want you to be familiar with. First one is Gestalt psychology. The second one is information processing theory. Let's talk about Gestalt psychology for a second. Gestalt psychology is actually quite a bit older than cognitive psychology. It starts back at the beginning of the 20th century. This guy named Max Wertheimer. And the word Gestalt is actually a German word that means whole or pattern. I'm going to write that out the side. Good test question there. When I say whole, it's spelled W-H-O-L-E. Sound good? Whole or pattern. And so this idea with Gestalt psychology, it says that the way our brain works is when we look at something, we don't break it down into the items that it's made up of and then add it up and then, come up with a conclusion of, hey, that's a, computer or that's a person, okay? What we do is our brain fills in the blanks for us, okay? Thank goodness for Gestalt psychology because our brain is constantly filling the blanks. It makes life a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, okay? So I want to show you how that works. Actually, the basis of this idea of Gestalt psychology, of pattern, is based off the research of this idea of phi phenomenon. And what that is they did a study where they brought individuals into a blackened out room and they had them step up against the side, like of the wall of one side. And at one end of the room, they have a light that would turn on, okay? And then as soon as that turned off, at the other end of the room, they'd have another small light come on, right? When that one would go off, this light would come on. And to the participants on the side, they asked them, what are you perceiving? What did you see after coming out of the room? And they said they saw a light going back and forth across the room. Was there actually a light going back and forth? No. It was just really two lights, one going on and one going off. Okay? So it's kind of like this idea. You just got really just two balls, but it seems like it's jumping from side to side, isn't it? That's because our brain is trying to fill in the blanks. Right? Our brain is processing things as a whole. This is kind of another aspect of variation of Gestalt psychology. There's actually no movement going on here in this particular image, but if you stare at the middle of it, stare at it long enough, then it make it look like something's moving, right? So there's this other idea, it's called the autokinetic effect, where it gives us a sense of movement, but the reason why we have this sense of movement, it's based off of our eyes, our jumping. We're trying to find reference points, all right? And it creates an illusion for us, okay? So Gestalt psychology is pretty cool stuff there. You see it all the time. Let me give you one more. This is not information processing theory. This is more Gestalt psychology. Our brain is filling the blanks here. What's the first line say? This classroom rocks, right? Candy tastes delicious. School is awesome. This is completely misspelled, right? But as long as the first letter and the last letter of the word is in the right spot, all the other letters in the middle can be jumbled up, and our brain can figure it out for us really quickly. Okay? So the way in which we read, if we really think about it, is really a reflection and aspect of Gestalt psychology. Okay? Imagine if our brain didn't do that. Imagine if we had to look at every stinking letter in front of us in order for us to figure out what the word was. You know, how laborious would reading be? Nobody would ever want to read anything, right? I don't want to read right now anyway. So thank goodness our brain fills in the blanks. One last example with Gestalt before we move on to the information processing theory. Maybe write Christmas lights out to the side. Okay? Christmas lights is a great example of Gestalt psychology. Okay? Essentially, it's the phi phenomenon just expanded. Christmas lights are, right? Because when you go to those Christmas light shows, like over in East Peoria, you guys ever gone to that, right? You got all this stuff that's moving around. But is really anything moving? No. It's just lights going off and going on. But it creates this sense of movement. That way, because our brain is constantly trying to make reference points and fill in the blanks there. Okay? So, some pretty cool stuff. Even if you really think about, you ever done those flip books before? Where you get like a pad of paper like this, somebody steals it, and you make a little drawing on each and every page, and then you start flipping through it like that. And it creates a sense of motion, right? Your brain's filling in the blanks, and it looks like a movie that way, okay? All right, the other aspect of cognitive psychology, the other category, subcategory, is the information processing theory. And it's kind of like a metaphor, an analogy. It says that our brain is functioning like a computer, meaning that when it comes to the way that we memorize things, it's all about inputs and outputs, right? And it's interesting to think about the way that the analogy works. You know, initially when it came out, computers weren't really all that good. And some of the older computers, if you try to run too many programs at the same time, you know what happened to those old computers? They would freeze and they'd crash. So with the analogy metaphor of the mind and the brain, they would say, well, what happened for people that have these seizures is they got too much stuff going on in the brain. They're overwhelmed, right? And so that's what's causing the seizures. That's the idea behind the theory here, okay? But as computers start to progress, and I look at how many tabs you guys have open on your Chromebooks today, it's crazy. We change, or the psychologists have changed and modified their approach to, how the brain works, right? You can multitask and juggle different concepts at one time and not necessarily have some type of seizure there, okay? So these are some areas of success with cognitive psychology. Intelligence, I want to emphasize that, and is one of the most prominent schools of thought today. So, we talked about psychoanalysis and Freud's ideas kind of dissipating. This is one that's kind of increased, and one other reason for that is the advent of brain imaging techniques has kind of fueled cognitive psychology a little bit today. Okay, so that's probably of the points there: intelligence and most prominent schools of thought. All right, let's change modes. Psychology today. All right, so I usually start this lesson with a particular question with our bell work. So I'll just go ahead and ask you to do some self-reflection. You're going to write it down, and then we'll share. We don't have a ton of time, but we'll try to take a moment here to do this. It's kind of an uncomfortable question, but, I've had many students, and they've all successfully completed this task. So the question is, I want you to write down 3 characteristics that you're looking for in a significant other, right? 3 characteristics that you're looking for in a significant other. If you would, go ahead and write that down. I'll go ahead and pause this.